Hi, so Sue Gray here, just updating on the New Zealand Outdoors Party policy on the COVID virus. Right from the start, when we didn't know what the risks were, the New Zealand Outdoors Party put out a press release recommending that the government close the borders and stop the problem from entering until we knew more and until we could decide whether things were safe or not. Well, the government said it was shutting the borders, but it took a long time, and we had leaky borders for a long time after that, resulting in the spread of the virus through the community and the eventual need to close down New Zealand for 5 weeks with the ongoing level 3 close down. What's now happened, as we've got more information, it now appears that actually the COVID virus isn't nearly as bad as the first fears, which is actually great news. The latest from the CDC in America is they now accept that it's very similar in harm to a flu virus, and it's slightly worse than the average flu virus for people over 65, but it's actually much less harmful for people under 65. So now we're starting to ask, what should the government do to transition New Zealand back to normal? Because do we really need to have New Zealand closed down every time we have a flu virus? If we close down for the COVID virus, what are we going to do next time a virus comes in over winter? Are we going to lock up again? Or are we going to look at things more in proportion? And the view of the New Zealand Outdoors Party is that nothing is ever an isolated issue. Everything is connected. And we're much more important to look at things holistically. How does the flu virus or how does the COVID virus impact on our health and our well-being, on our economy, and on our whole lifestyle, the things that we really hold dear to New Zealanders? The first thing is, let's try and keep ourselves well. So if we keep ourselves well, we eat good food, we have a healthy lifestyle, we get in the outdoors, we avoid poisons, we avoid radiation and other contamination that interferes with our health. A lot of the medicines we use are actually very harmful. So our first step is, let's be aware of what we're doing, let's be mindful, and let's make good decisions to stay well so that our immunity is as strong as it possibly can be, and so our physical, mental and spiritual health is all good. The second aspect is, having done what we can do to stay well, let's carry on with our lives as much as we normally can. So one of the criticisms we have with the lockdown is it was far too stringent. For goodness sake, why couldn't people go fishing? Why couldn't people go hunting in the outdoors? Why couldn't people go boating, go kayaking, go paddleboarding? We were told that we couldn't do that. The government said it was illegal. The police were prosecuting people, and New Zealanders were told to dob each other in if they saw one of their neighbours doing that. Completely contrary to the New Zealand culture and lifestyle. As it turned out, I did some research, and the law doesn't provide for the Minister of Health or the Medical Officer of Health to stop us from doing outdoor activities. It only makes provision to stop outdoor activities where people are congregating. So all of the activities like fishing, hunting, kayaking, paddleboarding, swimming, there was absolutely no power for the government ever to prevent us doing those activities. Now, we're really looking forward to the government fronting up and admitting that, because we have New Zealanders before the courts for doing those activities, so for breaching an illegal law. Now, my call is to the government to stand up, to the Attorney General, stand up, admit the errors and release all of those people. It's completely inappropriate for our government to be relying on fake laws to prosecute New Zealanders for doing activities that are part of the New Zealand culture. So I'll just finish for a second and then I'm going to do the other part. Okay. Now, as I got further into the actions of the government and what legal criteria they're using, it became even more interesting. There are basically 3 laws that the government's decided. The government's relied on: the Epidemic Preparedness Act, the Health Act Part 3, and the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act. They've mainly relied on the Health Act, Part 3, which is a Section 70, which provides for the Medical Officer of Health to provide certain restrictions. But what they've completely ignored is Part 3A of the Health Act. And Part 3A sets out all the rules that must be followed when they're exercising their powers to manage infectious and quarantinable diseases. So all along, people have been saying, this seems really odd. Can they really lock up or tell well people to stay home? Can they really close people's businesses? Can they really stop us from going out and carrying on with our outdoor activities that actually promote our wellness and promote our immunity? And what it's turned out is no, they can't. It looks like the government has only looked at the very first part of the rules under Part 3, made these restrictions on our lives and completely ignored the restrictions on them about when they can impose these restrictions. So when you look at Part 3A, it actually says the very type of things that we would expect. And it all really comes back to proportionality. They can only act under Part 3 and use their powers of infectious diseases and quarantines when it's in the big picture, it's justified doing so. So it's a serious problem. We've got an over-enthusiastic government getting bad advice, relying on a completely flawed model, not looking at the best information from overseas, and reacting to the media hype rather than the facts and the evidence, making decisions that impact on the lives of New Zealanders. What is it, $50 billion of budget having to be found from nowhere, having to be found from our pockets, or be found from our health system or our justice system or our education system, $50 billion being used to prop up the businesses that should never have been closed in the first place. Now, I say that is absolutely outrageous. And at the very least, we need to have a good look at how on earth this happened, who gave that advice, what advice did they get? Did they just get advice from one advice stream that was convenient, or did they do what you would expect a responsible government to do and get advice from an array of sources that were competent, experienced and represented the public interest? Because my concern is that they haven't acted in good faith on behalf of the public of New Zealand. And if they had done that, first of all, they would have acted very differently from the start. But secondly, as soon as they became aware of these failings, they would have stopped and had a good look and come clean to us and said, actually, we got it wrong. We need to fix this. You can go about your lives. The risk is not as bad as we originally thought. You don't need to have your businesses closed. And let's carry on as normal. Let's learn from our mistakes and let's carry on. So where are we now? Where we are now, we're waiting for the government to tell us what we can do in level 2, if and when level 2 comes to us. And what they're looking at doing is changing the laws so we can do less in level 2 this time than we did in level 2 when it was first introduced. Now that's another huge concern. The evidence is that COVID is much less serious than had been expected, anticipated when they started introducing all these restrictions in the first place. So if it's less serious, why are we having more stringent restrictions on what we can do? It's really important to understand what's motivating the government, and it's really difficult to understand because they don't seem to be thinking about what's good for us as New Zealanders and New Zealand community. They seem to be looking at some other wider agenda, some offshore agenda that is driving these decisions. And in my view, that is wrong. We elect our government to represent the people of New Zealand. We don't elect them to make friends overseas and to impress the masses overseas. We elect them to represent us. And the very first duty they have is to obey the law. And the second duty they have is to act in the public interest. And it's really, really important that they take stock, they slow down, they have a good look at those duties, they front up to us to explain exactly what they have been doing. They release all of the information that explains their decisions so that we, the people, can see why these decisions have been made and understand. And so that we, all of us, can learn for the future so that this kind of hype and crisis never happens again.